The Silly Goose Gang Podcast.
Silly Goose Gang, episode 41, and it is a real pleasure for me and Chris to be joined this evening by Nick Lavery, US Army Green Beret. So, Nick, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, hey guys, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Just admiring your lovely American flag there in the background. It's quite a thing. So yeah, thanks for taking the time to join us, Nick. I think reading your story, it's quite funny. I think you are one of the poster guy for not everybody's equal. Whenever we live in a world where everybody has to be the same, and then I read a guy like you and go, I'm not the same as that guy. We're different things. So thank you for making me feel like a bitch. Thanks.
I've been told things along those lines. Usually happens in the weight room or when we're training and whatnot, and usually it goes one of two ways. One way is what you just described as. It was, hey man, thanks for making me feel like a lesser man or lesser person. And the other side is, hey man, I was really sucking today. I was having a bad day. I felt like crap, and then I saw you, and it sparked me to just give a little bit of extra. Either way is cool. I mean, obviously I prefer to be kind of on that second side of the house, but I totally get it, man.
No, it's you definitely one of those guys who, when I check your Instagram and go, okay, I need to work harder. So yeah, you have that effect on me as well. It's just I think I
appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. So you do. So just sorry, I'm just going to jump right into the jiu-jitsu stuff, because I know you said you've done some jiu-jitsu, and we're both big jiu-jitsu guys. So when did that begin for you?
So I began my combat sports career and passion when I was a kid. I started boxing real young, and then transitioned and added wrestling to my game. Did that a little bit through high school. Once I got to college, I went to college to play football, so that was kind of my focus. I still did some wrestling and some boxing on the side just because I loved it. A little bit of competing here and there. Kind of transitioned into MMA towards the tail end of my college career. Once my football playing days were done, I still had some school left to knock out, so I started tinkering around in the MMA world. Back in the day, at that point, MMA was not sanctioned as a sport up in Massachusetts, so it was kind of done in the shadows a little bit, if you will. But I just enjoyed the sport. I enjoyed the competition and the training with the guys. I really didn't get into jiu-jitsu specifically until I got into the Army, and I was in basic training, and I was taught MACP Level 1, which stands for Modern Army Combatives Program. I was certified as a Level 1 MACP guy, which is just kind of the basics of what that program is, which is based on jiu-jitsu and kickboxing. Once I got out of basic, got to my unit, I started progressing to other areas to include MACP, and then I got incorporated into SOCP, Special Operations Combatives Program. And both of those two programs have a big jiu-jitsu foundation built into them. And coming from a guy as a stand-up fighter and a wrestler, I was just getting my ass kicked by these jiu-jitsu practitioners. Because the second I would get put on my back, I didn't know what to do. And I knew there was a huge flaw in my game. So I joined a local gym out of Fort Bragg that taught jiu-jitsu and MMA. And as I continued to train in both, I did notice my passion for jiu-jitsu specifically begin to take off, even more so than the striking stuff. And really, I've just kept up with it since, man. It's something I promote heavily because I think and you guys know, man, I just think it's an amazing sport, and it's an amazing community, and it just has effect across the entire spectrum of production. And I'm constantly promoting jiu-jitsu, especially guys that are, just down or having trouble dealing with stress or post-traumatic stuff. Hey man, find the closest jiu-jitsu gym you have and start training as often as possible.
Yeah, 100%. I know not similar to obviously post-traumatic stress, but my son trains jiu-jitsu with me and Chris as well. Once the gyms are all back open over here, and he had a spell. He's now 17. But he had a wee spell when he was like 14, 15, where he really struggled with a lot of mental health issues as a young teen. And I said to him, the best thing you can do is get out your brain a little bit get into your body a bit more. And we ended up finding jiu-jitsu kind of just over 3 years ago now, and the difference in him's been unbelievable. Do you know what I mean? So I agree 100% on that. That sentiment. It's been so positive for him, so positive.
I think it's great, especially, man, as you brought up with the kids. And I would help out with the kids' classes at my gyms. Usually it was taught before the adult classes would go. And just to be able to watch these kids, some of them are as young as, 5, 6 years old. And just over the course of, 6 months, 12 months, their confidence is increasing. Their discipline is increasing. And then you have a conversation with their parents, some of which I would be training with. They would talk about them in school or in preschool, the way they're acting around the house, just overall production just going up across the board. And I think anytime you're put in an environment, a controlled environment, where you are gradually getting comfortable being in what is an inherently uncomfortable situation, and that just gets reinforced over and over and over again, it starts to put things in perspective really quickly just across the spectrum of life. And I just think it's phenomenal, especially for children. My son, he's 3, and I'm already looking forward to the days when I can bring him in, get him in his little gi, and watch him go to work.
I think it's always really cool to see kids training with their parents. That's something that's really cool. It's a really cool thing for them to do together. One thing I want to touch on there is you said something, and we've said it so many times now in the podcast, is with life, as in jiu-jitsu, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's such an important thing to do. Life as well as rolling. Shit's not always going to be nice. Sometimes things are going to go bad, and you're going to be in a terrible situation. And if you don't train and you don't prepare for that situation, it's going to suck really badly. So yeah, jiu-jitsu is a fantastic metaphor, for that in life. So yeah, I want like yourself, you're saying yourself, Nick, a little bit of a boxing background, and once you sort of find jiu-jitsu, it just really gets under your skin. It's amazing the way it gets under your skin, and you're like, fuck, this is all I want to do now. I just want to find guys and fucking grapple. That's all I want to do. It's amazing. So yeah, you're saying, obviously from Boston. So were you a Mickey Ward guy?
So I trained at Romalo's West End gym when I was in college, which is the same gym that he trained at. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, it's funny. When that film came out, when the Fighter came out, and everybody was talking about, it was a great film in terms of being a film. And I said, listen, fuck all that. If you want to know about Mickey Ward, go watch Arturo Gatti, round 9, the first fight. That is Mickey Ward. It's incredible. So you're incredible. Did you ever get to hang out with him or?
Oh yeah, I mean, we didn't hang out socially. We weren't. I wouldn't say we were friends, but he would come by the gym all the time. When I was in college, I was a bouncer at a local bar, so it was one of his kind of regularly frequented locations. So yeah, we interacted, occasionally, every now and then. Great dude, salt of the earth, blue collar type dude. Just an all around solid guy.
Yeah, those are the guys we like. Those are the guys we like. So. How so we'll just jump straight into this now. That how do you find training with the leg issue? Leg issue? Well, it's not a leg issue. It's a fucking amputee.
Yeah,
something.
Yeah,
leg
it's
issue.
A good question, man. So I began to. That's funny. That's slight nuisance that you have to deal with. I began doing the jiu-jitsu stuff as an amputee while I was still in the hospital. So I was at Walter Reed in Bethesda, which is the biggest military medical hospital we have in the inventory. And there was a local black belt that had a school downtown in D.C., and he would come to the hospital once a week and work with anybody. It was mostly amputees, but he would work with anyone that was there going through treatment. And it started off real rocky, man. And you know what was harder really than learning my technique and my game now as an amputee was actually unlearning years and years and years of reaction and just responding accordingly as previously a guy with 4 limbs, and now I only have 3. So kind of just wiping the slate clean and starting fresh was just a challenge within itself. once the ball got rolling, it progressed pretty fast because I was loving it. It was great for my mobility. It was great for my cardio. It was great for my mindset. So I was training with him at the hospital once a week, and then I actually just became a member at his school downtown, and I was there usually 2 or 3 nights a week. So I was doing jiu-jitsu constantly, and it was a progression in terms of my game, but also the hardware that I needed to actually protect my limb, right? So my stump, I'll call it, which apparently, just so you guys know, is considered a derogatory term to the amputee community. I guess I'm allowed to say it because I have one, so I'll call it what I want. My stump is pretty sensitive, right? So there's all kinds of little bone spurs and stuff sticking out. So I can't really put any weight directly on top of it if I don't have any type of protective device. So in the beginning of my jiu-jitsu journey as an amputee, I was mainly just working from a seated position and working my ground game for my back. But like half my game was taken away. So I went to my prosthetist at the hospital and said, hey, here's what I need. And we just began working through different devices that I could put on my leg that would protect it, for one, and allow me to actually prop up weight on top of it and then kind of be able to play from almost like a kneeling position. So I think the socket I have now that I use is probably version, 27 or 28. We've just made modifications over the years. We had to remodify it once I started competing again. Different federations allow different types of supportive equipment. So really the goal was to make it as streamlined and as padded and as protective as possible. Not for me, but for whoever I was competing against. So to answer your question, it's been a journey. It really doesn't end, and that's really no different for me or for anybody else. It's just it's a constant, never-ending pursuit of a perfect game, which doesn't exist, right? Because it never ends. Yep. So I find myself to be real comfortable in certain positions, but I spend more of my time working on the positions that are more challenging for me. And my coaches, local, really kind of push me down that road. Like, hey man, you're great from upright, you're great from on top. Most of your weight is in your upper body. You're really strong, but we need to work on these gaps that you have here, here, and here. I'm like, all right, then let's do it.
Yeah, that's one of the questions I was going to ask because, I know our jiu-jitsu coach, John, he's a black belt in judo as well. And he says one of the biggest challenges he has in judo is he sometimes, he trains with a guy who's blind. And he says it becomes so, you can hear, he hears you breathing differently. So he has an advantage that some people would consider to be a disadvantage, but he turns it into an advantage. So what are the advantages and disadvantages now for you in jiu-jitsu? Because there must be some positions where, it becomes an advantage.
Yeah, I'll go ugly early. So the disadvantage is obviously I don't have a closed guard, right? That's really not possible in the terms of how you would normally close a guard. So when I am on my back, I do look to hit half guard as soon as possible, so at least have some kind of control. Same on the top. A full mount position for me is really, really tough because I only have really one stable platform on one side. It's real easy for me to just get rolled the other direction without posting an arm out to the side. The advantage, though, and I'll go back to kind of my Walter Reed days. I read the book Unstoppable by a guy named Anthony Robles, who was born with one leg, All-American wrestler. Yeah, phenomenal dude. I mean, if you guys haven't heard about him, I imagine you have. His story is fantastic. And I read his book, and there's a really interesting part of the book. It's actually from his mother's perspective, and she was saying how she would go to his competitions, and in the stands, other parents or viewers would say that, hey, this isn't fair. This dude only has one leg. It's not fair, saying that he was at a distinct disadvantage. Well, as his game progressed and he was able to find ways to use his body type as an advantage, the entire conversation flipped, and it was unfair for his opponent because he held so much weight in his upper body, right? So jiu-jitsu and wrestling, those are weight class sports. And because his upper body was so much stronger than any of his opponents, it was now considered that he had an advantage. And I noticed that myself when I really started to get back into competing, and I would cut weight and I'd get myself to a lower weight class or whatnot. But if you would look at me from the waist up against anyone I was competing against, whether I cut down to 200 or 215 or whatever it was, you would say there's no way these guys can be in the same weight class. This is ridiculous because I'm missing probably 40, 45 pounds worth of leg, right? So on one side, there's a disadvantage when it comes to my stability in the certain positions I can maintain control in. But on the other side, which I think I look at as more of an advantage, is my upper body is just going to be stronger than anyone that I compete against because I hold so much of the weight in my upper body. So there's two sides of the coin, obviously. I look at the positive side of it. And then also I'm able to transition into and out of positions kind of quickly without having a leg to work through some kind of a gap or work an angle because it's just automatically going to go. So the game's developed over the years, man, and advantage, disadvantage, it really doesn't matter. I love it. I go into there looking to get my ass kicked every day. And if I leave a training session without having gotten my ass kicked, then I made a serious mistake.
Yeah, that's a very obviously Ali gets his ass kicked quite regularly.
I told you, mate. I told you, mate.
I have to take my shots. I have to take my shots when I get them. So the story of how you lost a leg is incredible. So how did that happen? What was the build up to that? And because the story is for guys like us, it's like holy shit. So what's the story around about that?
Yeah, man. So my 2012, which went into 2013 deployment to Afghanistan. The backstory is we knew we were going into a very kinetic and very difficult trip. And it proved to be just that. As soon as we got there and started doing stuff, it was game on, and it was pretty much that way every single day. So I had been wounded 2 times prior to the incident where I lost my leg.
All right.
I took some shrapnel to the back of my shoulder. I took an AK round to the side of my face. Both of those were really minimal, not really a big deal.
No. Nick, those aren't fucking minimal. That's not minimal.
You can't casually drop into the conversation, just some shrapnel to a shot, AK-47 round to the face, nothing major, just, that's what I'm impressed with.
Hey, it's all about perspective, right? I mean, at the time of those incidents, yeah, okay, it's getting blown up and having grenades blow up near you and getting shot. It's obviously not normal, but it's throughout that deployment, believe it or not, we had guys that were getting banged up left and right. I lost several brothers of mine over there. So, I downplay it, and that's part of just kind of who I am, but it's more so is about everything that else was going on around us during that trip. That an AK round to the side of the face that just kind of ripped me open a little bit and was put back together, compared to what other guys were dealing with, including paying the ultimate sacrifice, literally was nothing. And when that stuff happened, the goal was to get back to the guys as soon as possible. And, I managed to make that happen through both of those incidences and get back to the guys. And that's what mattered to me. And that's what happened. I guess really I bring that up just to kind of preface really just how aggressive and kinetic that entire 6 months really was, leading up to the incident where I ended up ultimately losing my leg. And we only had a couple weeks left in the deployment. So we were about to transition out and another team was going to come in behind us. And we were doing what was kind of a standard mission for us. We had several different local entities that we were doing a mission with. So we had the Afghan National Army soldiers, kind of your more conventional guys. We had an Afghan Special Forces detachment that was attached to us the entire trip. We had some Afghan national police officers, and we had some Afghan local police officers. So a lot of different players in the game, which again was something we were used to. We had our base kind of compartmented where we all lived on the inner perimeter, and on the outside of that we had what we would call our motor pool, where we would keep our vehicles and our fuel and storage, and our HLZ was right there, so it was kind of segregated. And we had a policy which we enacted, was that prior to a mission, the leadership from the different sections would come into the perimeter, into our motor pool area, and we would brief them on what we were doing. The remainder of the troops would stay outside, and then they would go tell them where we were going, what we were doing, and then we would go. And that was just to kind of minimize having a lot of these people around us that we really didn't know in a very vulnerable situation. Well, on this particular day, the leadership came in, and a Ford Ranger pickup truck also came in with a couple soldiers. And I noticed it, and at the time I was an 18 Bravo, which are the weapons and tactics specialists on the team, and it's really base security is the responsibility of our section. I noticed it irritated me. I thought about dealing with it and addressing it right there and then, but I didn't. And I decided that I would wait until this mission was over, and I would bring it up with my detachment leadership, and I would have them address that with their leadership for future operations, something that I have lived to regret to this day. We get done with or we're about to wrap up with our pre-mission brief. We're doing comms checks and just final checks of our equipment. And we're all basically in this giant circle. So my entire team and some of the other infantry guys that were out there with us that were supporting the operation. And I end up turning and walking away, heading towards my truck before the brief was completely done. And as I'm making my way to my truck, I hear gunshots coming out from behind me. And my initial thought was somebody just kind of slipped their finger on the trigger and just clocked off around by accident, which wouldn't be unheard of working with Afghan partners. It happens. After the third or fourth, fifth round clocked off, I realized that someone was deliberately shooting, and I snapped my head around, and one of the soldiers had jumped up on the back of that Ford Ranger pickup truck. There was a truck-mounted machine gun, and he was opening fire into the group from about maybe 15 or 20 feet away. I had a solid piece of cover right next to me, which was one of our armored trucks. And my first instinct was to move behind that cover and then look to eliminate the threat, which is what we are trained to do and what is buried into us through training and repetition. I also noticed that one of our infantry uplift soldiers, who was set to be one of our drivers for that mission, was standing there just kind of like a deer in headlights. At this point, people are hitting the ground, whether because they're just looking to just get some cover, people are running, or people are getting shot, and he's not moving at all. So I decide to make a move towards him. So he's maybe 10 feet away from me. I go at him at a dead sprint, and I hit him with such impact, I ended up falling on top of him on the ground. And it was when I was laying on top of him was when I got hit. So I felt the first couple rounds hit my right leg, and from a machine gun of that caliber, from that distance, it feels like a sledgehammer is smashing into you. So I knew I was shot, didn't know how bad. Grabbed him, and I drug him maybe 5 or 6 feet behind a truck. And get behind the truck. I do a quick assessment of him, and he's okay. At this point, I guess maybe I should back up a little bit. As I get to where I'm going, the shooter is still firing. At this point, we're receiving machine gun fire from outside of our camp, so it was a coordinated attack. I grab a rifle that was laying on the ground next to me, and I go to engage, try to get some shots off. At this point, I'm kind of losing peripheral vision at this point, and my body's beginning to go into a state of shock. I don't take very many accurate shots. A couple of my teammates eliminated that immediate threat from within inside our compound, and then we're still receiving some harassing fire. But at that point, I'm really in no position to deal with that. So I do a quick assessment of this soldier, and he seems fine. He doesn't have any puncture wounds. He's in shock, but that's about it. And then I go to treat myself. So I expose my right leg, just kind of rip what was left of my pants off. And my leg is just complete hammered meat and bone at this point. And I noticed there's basically a river of blood flowing from where I had been hit to where I was currently laying after I drug this dude and myself. Just a river of blood. So I knew that my femoral artery had been severed, and my training told me I had probably maybe 8 to 12 minutes before I would be completely drained of blood. So time is of the essence. I grab a tourniquet, I slap that on, tighten it down as hard as I can. Bleeding doesn't stop. I throw on a second tourniquet, tighten that down as hard as I can. I can't tell if the bleeding has stopped or not. At this point, our medics are beginning their triage process, so they're kind of moving us into different categories. And I'm shoving him and all my other teammates that are still up away from me because I'm convinced that I'm gonna die. I'm like, hey guys, don't waste your time on me. Go work on somebody that you can actually help. They ignored me, of course. Put me on some fluids, and I was still bleeding. So they were trying to stop the bleeding. It really wasn't stopping. They threw on a third tourniquet on top of it, but I did notice I was still bleeding. So I had kind of a last-ditch effort. So I grabbed some gauze out of my med kit, and I loosened up one of the tourniquets, and I reached in with the gauze, and I was trying to feel around for where my femoral artery was actually severed. I think I feel something at this point. All the blood is shunting inward to my body to try to protect my organs. So I'm really dealing with these like meat mittens. I don't have a whole lot of dexterity, but I think I feel something. And I just wrench down as hard as I can, re-secure the tourniquet on top of it. And at that point, I was pretty sure that my work there was done. I didn't have anything else left really to do. So I kind of drug myself over in the direction of some of my teammates that were also wounded, and they were laying there, and they're in pain and they're scared. I just spent the rest of my time talking to them until the medevac bird could land. And that took anywhere between, I want to say it was 60 and 90 minutes before that first medevac bird could land. And that was because there was still an ongoing firefight in the area. And, they won't land a medevac bird typically under fire because you lose that bird. And now you've just made the problem a whole lot worse. So about 60, 90 minutes before I was life flighted out, man. And I'll just kind of pause there and let you guys kind of go from there.
Whew, fuck. That's where do you even begin? Like, it's such an insane thing. But what's interesting is through that whole thing is you still seem to be calm and in control of this. Like, you still seem off the situation. You were still in control of the situation. You know what was going on. You're saying to guys, just leave me. And you're aware of everything going on. So it seems like you were still calm, in that moment. You weren't panicking. There was no panic. You were just kind of, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what we've been trained to do. And, that's how it is. So
does it go back to that thing, Nick, of you kind of rise to the level of your training? Do you think that played a part at that point, that you were just assessing, remaining calm, and as you said, because you had it drilled in so long, you were able to maintain that?
Yeah, so it's interesting, man, because in the onset of the incident, I ignored my training, which is another decision that I live with forever, because my training tells me to move the cover, eliminate the threat, which I didn't do. It was my first instinct, and I ignored it, and I went after this other soldier. Now, I look back on that, and the what-if game doesn't end, but what if I had done what I was supposed to do, got behind cover, got a weapon system out, and I eliminated that threat? Would other dudes that were banged up or killed that day, would they be alive today, or would they not be wounded today? And there's no answer to that question. That's something that I still struggle with today. I've gotten better at it on the onset. Early in recovery, that was really tough for me to just know that I made quote unquote the wrong call. But I know in my heart of hearts, my heart was in the right place, and my instincts and my love for a brother superseded my training. The flip side of that is during medical procedure on myself, my training kicked in and I followed it step by step by step. So that, I think, ultimately is what ended up saving my own life, was that I was able to just go into that reactive mode, deal with massive bleeding, hemorrhage, massive hemorrhaging. These are the techniques and the interdictions that you do to stop it. And I was just kind of on autopilot doing what I had been trained to do. And I think the last piece of that is in terms of being able to stay calm. And there's no way you can really prepare yourself to be in that environment. And we train all day, and training is one thing and real life is another thing. It doesn't matter who you are and what you're doing, how tough you are, how often you've drilled this thing or that thing. When it happens for real, your body may not respond the way you trained it to respond. That's just the reality of combat. I was very accepting of the fact that I'm going to die, and I'm okay with that. And, I'm often asked that question, what's that like, laying on the ground, bleeding out, knowing your life is over? And I'll be honest with you guys, I was surprisingly content with it. I was frustrated because out of all the gunfights and engagements we had been in prior to that, the way I was going to be killed was at the hands of a guy that I had been training the entire time we were there. And I just remember thinking, man, I taught you how to use that gun and you just shot me with it, right? So that was really annoying, and I was really frustrated and angry about that. But at the same time, I'm a warrior, and this is part of accepting that as a profession. And if I'm going to go down, I want it to be surrounded by my brothers going down in combat. And I was fine with this. So I just think a combination of kind of my mindset there as a warrior and accepting the fate that was ahead of me, and my care and love for my guys and wanting to just be there for them in my last moments is really just what allowed me to, just kind of stay calm and do whatever I could, given the situation.
That's really interesting because we had, as we mentioned off camera, Nick, we had Mark Ormrod, the Royal Marines Commando, 2 episodes before this. It's not going out at the time of recording. Sounding all professional there, eh? But he ended up losing both his legs and an arm to an IED, and he talked us through the situation on the podcast, and he said exactly the same as yourself, Nick. He at some point he said, both his legs have gone in the IED explosion. I'm going to die here, and actually I'm okay with it. And he said, and he remembers very distinctly lying back on like the sand from Afghanistan. I'm sure you know far better than we do. And he said, and the sun was beating down, and he says he felt like he was laid on a beach in Spain, and he was okay with it. He was totally okay with it. In that moment, he was, I suppose, at peace with it. And it's interesting that you were in a very similar situation and kind of came to the same thought process, same conclusion. I don't know what the right phrase is, but that's really interesting.
Yeah. It's so in that time, you're saying when the helicopter was coming in, does time become kind of weird? Move slowly? Does it move fast? Are you sitting waiting on the chopper to turn up, or does everything, looking back now, does it seem like a blur, or do you remember very distinctly everything? Like, how does that, like, what's the thought process in your head?
Yeah, so when the incident first kicked off, every second felt like an hour. Everything was happening very slowly, and like I said, that soldier was no more than 10 feet from me. But the sprint that I had to get him, it felt like I was running for a year to get to that guy. And same thing when I was shot and I drug him and myself and I'm applying the tourniquet and I'm getting my situational awareness around me, it was very, very slow. It felt like it was forever. And really it was just a matter of seconds and or minutes, for that entire process to happen. Once the threat was removed and we got the situation outside of our camp relatively under control, that's when it's more of a blur in my memory. I think I was going in and out of consciousness, but from the time that they moved me and the guys that were going to go on the first bird to the HLZ point, that felt like a matter of minutes when really it was upwards of an hour. So that went by really fast. And then everything after that, it's just kind of spotty. And I do have memories of, and I'll just kind of jump ahead a little bit, when they first medevaced me out, they flew me to Fob Shank, which is where our AOB headquarters was located. So one echelon of command above us. And they brought us there because it was a faster flight than bringing us to Bagram, which has a higher level of medical care, but it's a slightly longer flight. So they went with speed versus level of care. They brought us to the first place. It was myself, and I want to say 2 or 3 other guys. The most severely wounded guys were on that first bird. And I needed a blood transfusion badly. And they administered a transfusion, and it was the wrong blood type. And in the in the fray of things, what ended up happening was they mixed up my last name with one of my teammates. We have similar last names, and they gave me his blood. So my entire body just completely shut down, and they weren't sure what happened, but they knew that I was going downhill really fast. I needed to get to Bagram to a higher level of care, so they put me back on a helicopter, and they flew me to Bagram. And it was when I was on that flight that they realized what happened, and they notified the hospital that was about to receive me, and basically, hey, this is what just happened, and there's no way he's going to survive the flight. So just be prepared to just receive the body when it gets there. In one instance, they were right. I did code on that flight to Bagram. They ended up getting me right into surgery. They hacked my leg off, below the knee, try to minimize the amount of damage my body was trying to recover from, pumped me full of my actual blood type, and obviously I managed to survive. That entire process, memory-wise, is a total blur, just kind of spots, random memories. But in the beginning of things, I remember those moments very clearly.
Yeah, I suppose that blood type issue, as crazy as this sounds, that's probably the bigger danger than being shot at that point. When they're pumping the wrong blood into your body, that must have been, as you say, that's close to the end at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's something I've gotten more comfortable with sharing, because I think there's lessons to be learned there, especially in the medical community. But what I always emphasize on is obviously that was not done intentionally, right? And I'm asked, are you angry about that? Like how does that happen? And hey, listen, we operate in the world of human beings that make mistakes, and they deal with stress, and they're doing everything in their power to save me and my friends, and I am grateful for everything that they did. I have no ill will towards them. And in fact, I didn't find out this till years later. I suffered an injury in a jiu-jitsu tournament. I shredded my labrum in my shoulder. I needed surgery. So I went in, and the doc is looking at my name and my records, and she's like, "Hey, were you in Afghanistan? It says here you're on dialysis at one point. Like, what's that about?" And I start telling her the story, and she's like, "Wow, okay." So she's like, "I was in Afghanistan in 2013, and when this happened with you, they sent out a mass report on what happened to the entire medical community, saying, hey, we just pumped this dude full of the wrong blood type. These are the new protocols we're going to put in place when dealing with blood." And so they revamped their systems and their protocols for blood work because of what happened with me. So, I paid a hard lesson. I'm fine. I'm obviously alive here doing things, so it's no problem to be able to look back and say, you know what, maybe that incident prevented that from happening to somebody else later on who would not have been able to survive that. So, there are positives to take away from every event, and those guys did what they needed to do, and it's I'm just grateful for what they did, and I have no anger, ill will towards them whatsoever.
Do you ever think to yourself, Nick, or wonder, there's someday, whether it's a higher being or whatever you want to call it, somebody wants you to be alive?
Yeah, man, it's tough to not think that. I'm a Christian. I don't spend as much time practicing as I should. But according to medical science and procedures, I shouldn't be alive, right? Yeah. To be laying on the ground with nothing more than a tourniquet and some gauze to stop massive hemorrhaging from the femoral artery being cut for over an hour, almost an hour and a half. It usually doesn't happen. So, I do think someone or something was looking out for me. And I also think that, I'm a stubborn person by nature, and I'm competitive. And I was willing to fight to stay alive based purely off of almost spite than anything else. So I think it's a combination of the both at the end of the day.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where, I'm not a believer in, the old white guy with the grey beard in the sky. That doesn't make sense to me. But, in certain instances, yours being one of them, you look at that and you go, there has to be something at play here. There just has to be something else. That just seems, not to turn this religious now, but that it just seems like, whether it's a guardian angel or something, but somebody has, in that situation, like Jesus, something, there's just got to be something else there. Like I say, I don't want to turn this into a religious seminar, but it just seems like one of those instances where you must be, lying there at night sometime going, oh, goodness, somebody must really, really want me to be here in that situation. So it's a hell of a story, which gets a little crazier because you go back in after all said and done.
Yeah, yeah, and that's been quite the journey in itself, man, and it doesn't stop. It's an everyday thing. But to just I guess I'll just kind of breeze through the wave tops, and you guys can ask whatever you want. I spent a year in the hospital at Walter Reed because of the infection that had set in, mostly because of how long I was on the ground. They just were incrementally amputating my leg higher and higher and higher and higher over the course of about 6-8 weeks. So I was in surgery 2 to 3 times a week, just rinse and repeat, pumping me full of antibiotics, trying to get the infection to stop, which left me with what I have today, which isn't very much. My femur is about 4 inches in length, and I'm somewhere between 6'5" and 6'6". So mechanically, that's a challenge as an amputee because my prosthetic has to be so long, and that just creates more and more of a challenge to deal with. So the year at Walter Reed, physical therapy, working with my prosthetist, getting myself upright and learn how to live life as a one-legged dude. Get back to my unit, which at the time was at Fort Bragg, and my command was like, "Hey man, great to have you back. What are you trying to do?" And I made it very clear from the very beginning that I was going to get back to my team. And they said, "All right, man, that sounds good. How do we do that? What do you need from us?" I was like, "Oh, I'm not ready to do that quite yet. This is still real early on in the process. I knew I needed a job in the meantime. I needed to provide value. So I asked to be on the SOCP committee, on the actual committee that teaches combatives for the Special Operations Unit out of Fort Bragg. So they granted that request. So I was working as an instructor. And at that time in my life, I was a bit of a crazy person, to put it bluntly. My life consumed with nothing more than getting bigger, faster, stronger, and getting back on the team. That was it. I didn't care about anything other than that. And it was, I'm up at 4, I'm doing my mobility, I'm doing my strength stuff, range of motion stuff. I get to the gym, I do my strength training, I get to work, I'm teaching classes. At lunch, we're doing jiu-jitsu open mat to keep our own game sharp. In the evening, go back, teaching more classes. At night, cardio, endurance, eat, sleep, repeat. That was it. My current wife now, at the time we were dating, I sat her down one morning and I said, "Hey, babe, I am going to have to put myself into a really dark place here if I'm going to have a shot at this thing. And just here's the heads up." And she's like, "Yeah, you got to do what you got to do." So I locked myself in this dungeon, man, and it was just consumed of work and discipline and eating and resting and training like an absolute lunatic, which I did for about 8 months. And at about that point, I felt like I was as ready as I was going to be to take a shot at getting back onto the team. And I had no idea what that process was going to look like. I just told my command, I said, "Hey, what do you need me to do to prove and demonstrate my abilities to go back?" And there really wasn't a laid out pipeline for me to really follow. They just kind of started throwing things at me one after another. And it started with just, your basic physical fitness test and a couple other physical fitness assessments. They put me through another psych screening because, like I said, at this point, people around me genuinely thought I was out of my mind. So that came back good. The docs was like, "He's no more crazy than he was as a 2-legged dude. So like, he's good to go." It put me through a proficiency evaluation and just all these things. It took about 3 months of usually once a week I was doing something to display my capabilities. And at the conclusion of my last physical assessment, the group commander was there. The group command sergeant major was there. About 50 other people were there watching me do this last thing. And, I completed it. And I looked over at the boss and I was like, hey, sir, what else do you need me to do? This is like 90 days worth of stuff. And he said, he's like, if I wasn't here to witness you doing what you just did, I wouldn't believe that it was possible. And you have your orders tomorrow to go back to your team. So, it was a huge win for me. And, kind of flash to bang, from the time I was injured to the time I was back on the team was about 2 years total, which is still real early on in the process. I'm about 7 years removed from the incident, and I'm still learning how to be more efficient and stronger as an amputee. It's, like I said, it's an everyday thing. So I get back to the team, and they were already well into their training cycle. And about 2 months after I got back to the team, we were back in Afghanistan. So that would be my first trip as an amputee, and that was 2015.
So, in terms of amputees going back in, is that, I know you got a lot of praise, for doing such a thing, which you rightly deserve. But is that a common thing or an uncommon thing, or how what's the process with that, Nick?
Yeah, so it's certainly not a common thing. There are amputees in the military, active duty across the branches. We all amputees, we are blessed with the technologies that have developed predominantly since 9/11 and the amount of amputees that the military has had to deal with. So there's been a lot of money in research and development and technology advancement that have given us amputees the tools that to make it possible for us to remain in active duty service. When I got back from that 2015 trip, there was a lot of visibility on us during the trip. There was a lot of concern about me being there. It was a kinetic deployment. It was aggressive. It was counterterrorism, direct action type stuff, and there were concerns about me being there. And really, I can say with almost certainty, if one thing had gone wrong with me being a part of whatever happened, they were going to yank me off the team. So we were constantly being checked on. How's Nick? And no SF team wants that amount of visibility on us. And I give my guys a lot of credit, my ODA leadership a lot of credit for dealing with that. When I got back from that trip, it was something that was being talked about, and I understood that, and I was asked to address it, a variety of different platforms and stages, kind of highlight some of the things that we've done in the military community, and I was able to get behind that and be supportive of that. But it also started getting thrown around that I was, the first amputee to return to active duty and the first amputee to deploy, and none of that's accurate, right? And when that was getting thrown around, it really irritated me, and I was like, nah, I know that's not the case. I'm looking for some closure on this and some actual data mining. So I was real aggressive with my command and on the government side of things and on our strength and conditioning side of things to actually do some research. And what came back from that was that there were no records of special forces operator returning to combat as an above the knee amputee. And, that's something that, I'm certainly proud of, but, that was never and is never part of my deciding to do, what I do and stay in the game. It has nothing to do with driving me towards being the first this or first that. I've been a few firsts, since I was injured, and I'm proud of it, all of which has come with an amazing support system around me. I haven't done anything by myself. So I guess to answer your question, man, there are amputees out there that are still in the fight, one degree or another. There are still amputees out there that are deploying to dangerous places. For an above the knee amputee to actually be returning repeatedly to actual combat is something that from the data mining that's happened, no one's aware of that has happened before. So, it is what it is.
That's super cool. Do you think, Nick, that I suppose as well, particularly in the special forces, the ethos of that egalitarian elite where, if you meet the standards required, you're in, do you think that helped in terms of you getting back out? Because as you said, your commander or your CO said, if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed it. But you had a defined pathway of, just for argument's sake, do X amount of pull-ups or do a timed run. And because you were able to do that and prove that you could, did that play a big element in you going back onto the active deployment?
Yeah, it did. Some of the assessments I had to do were designed specifically to replicate what it's like downrange and in combat. So there's pull-ups in the run-in and stuff is important. You can measure the level of someone's physical fitness with that stuff, but they were also real specific in some of the events they had us do. I think one of the biggest takeaways, man, is even though, I did all these different events and assessments and whatnot, same with training. On that deployment, I had a lot to learn, and it was the details that you take for granted as a two-legged guy. And I can remember working through the process of getting in and out of a truck, and that's something that you wouldn't even think about before. You just like one step in front of the other, you get in, you sit down. Well, for me, that wasn't quite as simple, and I needed to work on literally just getting in and out of a vehicle. So in our off time, I would find tasks like that, and I would just drill them. It's all like jiu-jitsu. I would just drill them over and over and over and over and over again. Try different techniques, different hand placement, different foot placement. I had my teammates video recording me. I'd go back, I'd check the tape. They had me on a stopwatch. I was out of my mind during that trip, same as during the train up, because I had so many gaps I needed to fill, and I hadn't a second to waste. So we'd get done with a mission, we'd go back, we'd refit, guys would eat, I'd be out in the truck working on getting in and out of the truck, or some other menial task like going up into the hatch, reloading the 50 cal, coming back down, timing myself. So as great as it was to be back in Afghanistan, which is exactly where I wanted to be, I had a lot of learning still to do. So that trip was busy in itself just with operations, but I was jamming the rest of the time with operational tasks that I had not even considered needing to perfect before I was actually in that environment. So it was kind of twofold, man. The preparation to get there was certainly challenging, and there were a lot of things I needed to do, but I also realized very quickly once I was there that I had a lot to do still from that point moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I think once you get, dealt your hand, and this is what the situation is, in any situation, the situation right now, around about COVID and all this stuff, is you kind of go, okay, this is a situation. We just have to adapt and move forward because, there is nothing else. If you don't adapt and move forward, you kind of end up kind of staying still and just kind of getting lost in that moment. So in terms of what you did, it's the same idea as, okay, this is a new problem. How do we solve this problem? How do we get around this problem? And let's keep moving forward.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that that kind of mentality works at that level of pressure and circumstance. You can still go and do these things and go, okay, this is an issue, but how do we get around it and still get the job done? So it's really, quite an inspirational thing to hear that happen, and at that level to say, okay, watch this. Do this is an issue, but let's get it done.
And really, that's it. And whether it doesn't, whatever you do for a living or for your hobbies, the process is still the exact same. And you and I kind of jumped off this call. You're like, man, I look at you and it makes me feel like a bitch. It's like, well, I'm no different than anybody else. I'm a human being who was given, a set of obstacles to deal with, and I just refused to accept defeat and to get to where I wanted to get to, and that came with a ton of setbacks and hardships and failures, along the way. And, failure, man, I won't go off on a tangent, but just, people's relationship with that word is just so critical. I'll bring it back to jiu-jitsu. You learn when you get your ass kicked, right? Ali, you're going to be a pro here any minute because apparently you get your ass kicked all the time. Like that's when you get better. It's not a matter of if it happens. It's when it happens, what do you do about it? What do you do about it? You address the lessons learned and then put the work back in and then work to failure again and again and again. And, anyone anyone can do it. I'm a firm believer in it. I am not cut from a separate cloth. I am not some type of weird organism from another planet. I'm a human being. I'm blood and flesh like anybody else. And, you just have the mentality to just not accept anything other than achieving your goals. And then that's it,
And to be fair, I like to take the piss out of Ali because that's what, friends do. But, he does, there's a few things that I do in jiu-jitsu, and he's now got very good at shutting those things down because I do them repeatedly. So he just goes, okay. So, he does. That's as much praise as I'm going to give him. But yeah, he does.
I think that's the nicest thing you've ever said to me.
It's the nicest thing I've ever said to you. Yeah, but I just wanted to make that point because I say these things to him, but because it happens, he does adapt, and that's as much praise as I'm going to give you. But
on the flip of that, Chris, you then adapt because then I start shutting down what you were going to do. So now you go back and learn something else. So it's that continual process of
that's all it is,
arms race, isn't it? It's that arms race.
That's all it is. You just have to find a way. So I wanted to circle back to those little minor incidents where you got shot in the shoulder and shot in the face, if you don't mind, Nick. Since you just kind of brushed them off so flippantly at the time. So what was this? Both those incidents, because those both sound to me, fairly major. See, what was the situation with those?
Yeah, the first time, man, we'd only been on the ground a couple weeks, and we were doing operations about every day, and we were driving to do something. We got ambushed. A few of us and our partner force, we dismounted. We would fire maneuver through this little village. We were receiving machine gun fire and sporadic AK fire and some indirect fires from. And as we were clearing our way to the main compound, we're getting ready to breach one of the openings, and something just exploded behind me. And I felt the impact to the back of my shoulder. And I hadn't been injured in combat before, so I'm like, oh, this is new. And I look back, and there's like a lemon-sized hole in my shoulder, and I'm gushing blood. And I've been banged up before, in combat sports or in the streets, but it's a different situation. You're just looking at a hole in your shoulder, right? And gunfire is going off around you. It's like, okay, this just happened. Training again just kicked in. I opened up my med kit, I grabbed some gauze, I threw it in. We got to a point where we could kind of reconsolidate for a second. One of my teammates came over, he wrapped it up with an ace bandage, secured it. And we just continued pushing. We cleared the area, did what we needed to do, got back in the trucks, and we were heading back to the house. Got back there, and my medic got a chance to take a look at it. He's like, oh yeah, this is kind of ugly. He's like, I'm gonna call in a medevac for you. And I threw a temper tantrum like a 6-year-old girl in the toy store aisle, and he didn't want to leave. He's like, nope, I got to get you out of here. You got to doc's got to take a look at this. Oh my God. Okay, fine. So I get a helicopter. I go over to where the AOB was located. I talked about that earlier, and this is a funny story. I'll tell this real quick. Medic looks at it, and the doc is like, all right, man, the only way we can heal this is we have to, twice a day, we have to pack it with antiseptic gauze. I can't stitch it shut because if I do, it's going to leave an open cavity inside your shoulder, which will manifest into infection and become a problem. So twice a day, I have this gauze packed. I would just let it sit. They take it out, repack it so that it would heal from the inside out, which makes sense.
Yeah.
So I was there for about a week-ish, and I'm getting real antsy. I'm like, this is bullshit. My medic can do everything that is happening here. Why can I not go back to my team? Well, the main doc was at Bagram at a separate location, and his orders were for me to remain there until the wound had been completely closed, which could have taken a month. And I wasn't satisfied with that. So one morning, real early, I grabbed one of my buddies and I had him drive me down to the airfield. And I went from one C-130, which is an airplane, one to another. And I found a flight crew that was on the way to Bagram, and I asked them if he'd give me a ride. And they said, sure. So I jumped on the bird. We flew to Bagram. I land. I walk over to our headquarters building, unannounced, obviously. I walk in, and my higher level command is all sitting there, and they're like, hey, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I need a helicopter ride back to my team right now. And I'm not exactly in the most professional of situations at this time, but I'm real angry and I'm making my point. And the commander there, he's from Boston, so he's talking to me about the Patriots and the Red Sox and just on this tangent. And we're kind of hanging out. Well, the command sergeant major is there, and right there next to him, the phone rings. And it's my sergeant major, who's my immediate boss or boss's boss, from the location I had just left from, completely unannounced. And he was not happy with me. And so he's yelling at the other sergeant major, basically asking where I am, and I'm standing right there, and I know what's about to happen. So I get on the phone, and he yells at me for a bit, and I'm like, hey, so I apologize, but I need to get on a helicopter, and this is where I am, and I'm trying to do what I got to do. And he's like, all right, man, just don't do that again. Kind of yelled at me a bit more, and that was that. So I threw a temper tantrum there as well. And as I'm standing there, and I'm in the control center, the Joint Operational Control Center, there's television monitors around, there's all the staff is in there. It's actually my first time ever in one of those types of facilities. Right as I'm standing there, my team is out on an operation, and then they get into a gunfight, and I'm watching it from some of the monitors inside the jock, and now I'm really losing my mind, and I'm flipping out, I'm throwing stuff around. They get the situation under control, but I insist on getting on a helicopter. Well, the doc comes in, and he's like, no, my orders are for you to stay until it's healed. And the commander there was like, hey, Doc, I understand what you're saying. I don't think you really want to tell this guy no. He seems pretty pissed. And he'll probably redirect that anger towards you. So the doc got kind of outvoted on that one. And I was back on a helicopter a couple days later. And, like I said, man, it really wasn't a big deal. My medic was treating it. I was back doing operations the next day. I'd be out. I'd look over. The gauze would be bleeding through. We'd swap it out and just keep going. It wasn't a real big deal.
When I did the research on this, Nick, I had read, I think it might have been in the Boston Globe, I read about that incident that you've just described. And in it, they kind of casually say, you look back and just packed it with gauze. And having seen pictures of you, and then that story, I had visions of Jesse Ventura and Predator, just like, that kind of way. Just like, yeah, it's okay, keep moving. Just not caring, just like, move forward. That was the image I had in my head when I read that story, and having seen pictures of you on your social media. Just pack it and move.
Yeah, that's it, man. Not nearly as cool as Jesse the Body Ventura, but I guess maybe similar.
Yeah.
The second incident, man, it's we were on the way back from a mission. I was in a trail vehicle. Our lead vehicle got hit with an IED, a massive IED. Picked up the truck and threw it. I was out of a turret in the rear vehicle, so I had a front row seat to what was going on. A bunch of my buddies that were in the back of the truck, they get projected through the air, flying around like lawn dots, and I knew with everything in my soul that everyone in that vehicle was dead. I mean, the explosion was that big, and it just picked up a fully armored truck and just threw it to the side of the road. I jumped out of the hatch again. Kind of my training told me to do one thing, and I did something else. This is something I'm proud of, but I jumped out of the hatch and I took off on foot, sprinted about 300-400 meters towards the crash site, and as I was coming down, the truck ended up landing off the side of the road in this apple orchard, and I ended up sliding down into the orchard, and I'm moving towards the truck, maybe about 25 feet away, and I trip and fall, and I look back, and I tripped over one of my buddies who was the turret gunner of that truck, and he was alive, and I couldn't believe it, and I was almost in more shock than he was. I'm like, oh man, okay, so I'm doing an assessment of him. His leg is snapped in half. He's bleeding from the mouth. He's got some pretty severe post-blast injuries he's dealing with, but he's relatively okay from what I could see. And, maybe about 5 or 6 seconds into that, we start getting engaged by a bunch of maybe 3 dismounted guys that were moving onto the vehicle. They hadn't seen me yet. They were just shooting at the truck, which, again, about 20-25 feet from me. So I had to do, what was really tough was leave my friend. I wanted to stay there with him, and he's obviously scared and panicked, but I had to leave him and go deal with the immediate threat. So I eliminated that threat, and 2 out of the 3, and the third one took off running, and he was firing back towards me over his shoulder, just blindly shooting and running away. And I'm maneuvering through these apple orchard towards him. And once again, I fall and I land up on my back looking up at the sky. And I thought initially I had run into a branch from one of the trees and it just knocked me down. Come to find out a little bit later that I'd actually been struck in the side of the face by an AK round, which I didn't know. I popped back up. I just kind of checked myself. I was fine. And I was going to go continue to maneuver on this dude. And I look over and the truck that had been hit by the IED was now on fire. And the rest of the guys, they're setting up support by fire positions. They were dealing with machine gun and mortar rounds that were coming in. So they're doing their thing. They're responding accordingly. Meanwhile, I'm not doing what I should have been doing. So I decided to move to the truck, and it had landed on its driver's side door. So the passenger side door is facing towards the sky. And at this point, it's just kind of a hunk of metal, and it's on fire from the rear of the truck moving towards the cab. And I didn't know if anyone was left inside. So I jumped up on top of it and looked in. Fortunately, the passenger door had been blown off. So I was able to just look down. And our detachment commander, our team leader, was in the truck. And he was the only one left in the truck. And I look in, and the ammo from inside the truck is now cooking off from the heat, from the flames. So it was like looking inside of a bag of popcorn in the microwave. And we're still receiving some harassing machine gun fire, and it's a pretty bad day. It's not looking good for any one of us. So I jump in the truck, I grab him, I kind of shimmy him up towards the door that I had come in. He's a big cat, man. This dude played offensive line for West Point. He's probably 290, 300 pounds without his equipment. So, big boy. I kind of hoist him up. I climb out. I kind of just deadlift him out of the vehicle. At this point, some of the other guys had shown up. I kind of just chuck him off the side. The other guys grab him, pull him away. He had some pretty severe injuries. He's ended up losing one of his legs below the knee. He had a couple other arterial bleeds. So he was real touch and go for a bit, but we got him. We gathered up everybody else that was inside the truck. Nobody was killed, as amazing as it is. We set up a CCP. We treated the guys as needed. Medevac Bird came in, and it was at that point I was treating one of the other guys. One of my teammates came over and said, "Hey, man, did you catch a round to the face?" And I was like, "No, I ran into a tree." And he's like, "No, I don't think that's what this is." I hadn't seen it yet. So eventually my medic gets to me, and he's like, "Yep, you need to be medevaced." And again, I throw a hissy fit, and I refuse to leave, at least until we had our QRF response force. They showed up. Once the area was secure, I listened to my medic. I listened to my team sergeant. I got on a helicopter. I flew out to get treatment, and I walked into the hospital, and I am fired up, pissed at this point. And my guys were in there. They're all way more severely wounded than I am, and I only cared about them. And the doctors are all trying to treat me, and I'm not being very cooperative with any of these people. Eventually, someone kind of calms me down. He's like, "Hey, man, just let these guys treat you." And I'm like, "Fine, but I got to take a piss first." So I go take a piss, and that was the first time I looked at myself, and it looked like a zombie had just taken a bite out of the side of my face, and I was still bleeding, right? So it actually had clipped an artery in my face. So it's still like piss and blood all over myself. And I was like, I kind of felt bad for giving my medic shit about insisting I get medevac, because I was like, I probably wouldn't want to medevac me too. I don't look very good. So I go in to see the doc, and he's like, "Hey, man, an artery has been clipped. It's no big deal, but I need to cauterize the wound," meaning they use like this little mini welder. And he's like, I'm gonna give you some pain meds. And I was like, "No, I don't want any pain meds." And he's like, "No, you're going to want some pain meds." I'm like, "No, listen, I need you to get this done as soon as possible. 2 of my friends are going into surgery right now, and I need to be awake and coherent for those dudes. Like, just do it." And he's like, "Oh, shit." So he looks over at the commander, and he's like, "Hey, man, Nick's not letting me give him any pain meds." And the commander was like, "Well, then just do it." So he gave me a little local anesthetic, some lidocaine, and he welded my face back together pretty much. And what was scarier than the procedure itself, I just kind of bared down and dealt with it. So I'm laying on my side, and he's basically gluing my face back together with this welding torch. My current wife was deployed with us then, and she was working out of the place that I was currently at. And now this is the second time that I've been injured, And she's not happy about that at all. And I'm laying there, and she walks into the treatment room, and she is bullshit pissed at me. And I'm laying there like, oh man. And actually, that was more scary than what I was doing with my face. I was like, oh shit. The doc's like, hey man, is she here with you? Because she does not look happy at you right now at all. I'm like, nah, man. Can you like protect me from her? Because she's probably gonna kick my ass. Her and I met at our fight house. She's a jiu-jitsu practitioner. She's an MMA fighter. She's a tough chick. So I could just see in her eyes she was ready to give me a pretty good beating. But they put it back together. Fortunately, there was a Army reservist who was deployed, who in his real world job is a plastic surgeon. So man, he put it back together. I got a little scar here, but you really can't even notice it. Yeah, man, and that was it.
I love.
Really important.
I was just going to say, I love how casual you are about these things. That's absolutely amazing. It's like you're so casual with it. It's like, some scars, fine, fair.
I was going to mention the other side about the fact that, generally speaking, guys aren't scared of other guys. They're scared of other guys' wives.
Yeah,
that's cool. I'll take you on, but your missus, your missus is 5'1" and 9 stone, but you're still not going anywhere near it because you know she will kick your ass.
Yeah, 100%.
So one of the things that I know we're pushing on time now, Nick. One of the things quickly that I was just wanted to ask talk to you about was a scene on the 11th. What day is this? So was that Friday? You had done Murph. And that's a workout that I've done a few times. How do you find it? Do you find it brutally hard? Do you do it with a weighted vest?
Yeah. So I wore my actual kit. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's I've done it a few times. I did it once with a few American friends. Were doing it for American Memorial Day. So I got up at, I think I ended up doing it at like 3 o'clock in the morning here. So we all kind of synced up in time and we all kind of done it at the same time with those guys. And it's fucking such a horrible workout. Such a fucking brutal workout. Ali, have you ever done Murph, Ali?
Never done the full Murph, no. Nah.
Man, it's that's a motherfucker of a workout. So yeah, it's a cool workout to do on those days. But yeah, it's one I think we should make Ali do it actually. But yeah, it's cool to do it. And what sort of time are you heading? Are you looking at for that?
I didn't actually time myself this last time we did it. I almost felt like I almost kind of cheated it. So I do run, right? I have a running leg, and I do run almost out of spite because I was told early on that I would never be able to run again. So that every time I strap my running leg on, I think about those conversations that it was told to me. As an amputee, I deal with the socket and the whole system for it to stay on. It's an ongoing process as if I gain weight, lose weight, if I'm in a hot environment, cold environment, it needs minor adjustments every now and then. I actually have an appointment tomorrow to get a new setup. So the socket and the leg I've been using the last few weeks, it doesn't really fit right. So I did the whole Murph workout just on one leg. So I didn't have my prosthetic on. And instead of doing the run, I did I busted out my Concept 2 rower, and I just set that up there for the That's 1 mile on the front and the back. It might be worse. I couldn't tell. So I didn't get my time. It certainly wasn't my best. But kind of to our opening point, we did it with a whole bunch of us did it. And my current company commander, he's brand new to our unit. He did it with us. And he's like, man, we got done. We were kind of just talking and reminiscing, 9/11 and some other of our brothers that have fallen and stuff. And he looked over and he's like, hey man, he's like, about halfway through, I was really feeling sorry for myself. And then I looked over at you and you're just hammering out literally one-legged squats. And I had nothing to feel bad for. So, it allowed me to just kind of drive on that much, more aggressively. I'm like, that's perfect. That's great. If that happens, it's great. I'm here to kick your ass. I'm here to kick everyone's ass. I'm not here as a cheerleader. I'm not here to motivate anybody. I'm here to get this work done. So I finished second out of the crew. There were maybe like 20, 25 of us that did it. I was pretty pissed. My actual team leader on my detachment, he beat me, which, he's an animal. And he's a short little dude. He's like 5'6", so he's got this little tiny range of motion. So I feel like it's cheating for his squats and his pulls and his push-ups. I have to move my body like 5 times longer than he does. Humbly accepted defeat, but so yeah, I didn't get the time, man. I do think that actually doing it on a Roa may have been worse than if I was running it.
I always say, so when I was boxing as an amateur, I did a lot of rowing for conditioning and under concept too. And doing rower sprints is one of the worst things you can ever do. It is fucking awful, but it gets you in incredible condition. But it is brutally hard. If you're pushing hard on a rower, it is savagely hard. So yeah, that might be worse. I might actually have to try that at some point. It's just try and do Murph, but with a mile row instead. That might be something to try.
And pistol squats, aren't they? One-legged pistol squats, so you can match up with Nick.
I genuinely, this is again, I cannot do pistol squats. I have to use an Olympic ring or something to steady me. I just can't. Sorry. When I say I can't do it, I just haven't tried hard enough. That's what I should say.
There it is.
But yeah,
I like it.
I just haven't tried enough. But yeah, that's we are pushing on over time. Like
we'll start winding down.
Yeah, like you get on with your day over there, Nick. But hopefully that was not a too bad conversation, and
awesome.
It was really good fun for us. We say this all the time, but we really like talking to military guys. It's always interesting to hear your guys' stories, and we always thank you guys. We're not American, but we always thank you guys for doing what you do, and it's always a pleasure for us. So thank you very much for your service.
100%. And number one, Nick, again, thanks very much for jumping on when I reached out and agreed to come on. Appreciate it. I know you said you'd listened to a few and decided crazily that you enjoyed it and you'd come and join Talk to Two Daft Scottish guys. So I appreciate you taking the time to do that. Just as well, for anyone wanting to find out more about you and to be inspired by your social media when they're feeling lazy, where can they find you on the internet or social media? And we'll tag this in the video and in our show notes as well.
Yeah, so ironically, my website is actually just about to go live here, maybe today or tomorrow. It's machinenick.com. So machine is in machine, and then Nick is in Nick.com. That's got all my social links on there and whatnot. And I'm always very aggressively telling people, and a lot of people take me up on this offer, which I'm super humbled and grateful for. To reach out through any one of the socials or my email, which is all on there, with questions. Military, SF, training, whatever it is, I make it an absolute point to get back to everybody at some point. And just to wrap up with you guys, man, we talked about this earlier, but, I'm super just humbled and just grateful to come on here and talk to you guys. I listened to a few episodes before I agreed to come on here, man. And, the greatest takeaway for me from doing this with you guys, believe it or not, is actually just being turned on to the Silly Goose Gang podcast. I'm a fan for life, and I love what you guys are doing and your crazy accents. And it's probably the first time ever, at least in America, where people can understand me more than whoever it is I'm talking with. So that's super cool, on my end. So I'm a fan for life, guys. I just hope you guys keep doing what you're doing, and I'm looking forward to the next episode.
That's awesome. I think that is not. It's very on Silly Goose Gang mug. We've got a section of mugs, so we'll get the Silly Goose Gang mug sent out to Nick if we can. I'll get your address off the offline, and we'll get a Silly Goose Gang mug sent out to you after that endorsement.
Awesome. It seems hilarious to us that you actually have listened and enjoyed them. So 2020 is a crazy year, and we are just. As I was saying earlier on, you get dealt these you get dealt a hand of cards, and you go, okay, we have nothing to do. Do we sit in the house and do nothing because we can't work, or let's be constructive? What can we do? Let's start a podcast, man. Let's start speaking to interesting people, and here we are speaking to you. So you make do with your situation, and you can either sit and complain, or you fucking get shit done, and
that's it.
Here we are, man. So Yeah, it was awesome. Really enjoyed that conversation, man.
Absolutely. Episode 41, Nick Lavery, thank you so much for joining the Silly Goose Gang. Episode 41 in the can, done and dusted.
The Silly Goose Gang Podcast.